Well, good afternoon. We're going to get started. The leader will be with us shortly, but I wanted to begin by just making a few observations and then invite my colleagues to do the same. I think there are two aspects to the resignation of Michael Flynn that we ought to keep in mind, two parts of the context of what has happened within the last 24 to 48 hours. The first is that it's very important, I think, for us to do a thorough investigation of any contacts between the Trump campaign and any Russian officials during the course of that campaign. Among, I think, the very serious allegations have been that there were a course of contacts that is within the scope of what the House Intelligence Committee will be investigating. And I think those are among the most serious allegations, because if there was any form of collusion with the Russians during the course of their illegal activities, that would obviously be of the utmost gravity. So I think that is a part of the context here. That is a set of allegations that can and must be investigated. What has taken place most recently, though, surrounds the issue of Flynn's contact with the Russian ambassador at the end of December. And to me, the salient point here is if, in fact, the Justice Department alerted the White House, alerted White House counsel weeks ago that Flynn had lied about his discussions with the Russian ambassador, it is inconceivable to me that the White House counsel would have kept that to himself. So others in the administration were aware that the National Security Advisor of the United States had misled other administration officials who had in turn misled the American people. And they were okay with that. The administration was okay with the fact the American people were laboring under the falsehood that they had not discussed the sanctions with the Russians. The resignation of Michael Flynn was brought about not by discovering the falsehood, but by the fact that the falsehood became public. And that ought to be deeply disturbing to everyone, that the White House would have even contemplated tolerating a national security advisor who would lie to them and to the American people through the vice president. This obviously begs a lot of questions about whether those conversations between Flynn and the Russian ambassador were sanctioned by the president himself or others in the administration, whether they were knowing of those conversations, and why those who were knowing did nothing to correct the record when the American people were told otherwise. All of this merits investigation. That investigation, I believe, ought to be done in part through the Intelligence Committee as part of the investigation we're doing now. And I was very disappointed to see the Speaker today unwilling to commit to investigate these communications between Flynn and the Russian ambassador. My feeling is that if the Speaker is not willing to commit to this, he ought to allow the formation of an independent commission and get out of the way, because these questions are far too important to go unanswered. I'm also want to say that I'm pleased to see at least some Republicans stepping forward today to call on the president to speak directly about whether he authorized these communications between Flynn and the ambassador, whether he was aware of these. The president, I think, owes the American people an explanation, and he ought to do that directly and not through dissembling aides. And with that, let me introduce Elijah Cummings, the ranking member on the Government Reform Committee.
Let me begin by asking everyone in this room a very simple question. Do you hear that? Do you hear the silence? This is the sound of House Republicans conducting no oversight of President Trump. Zero. That is what it sounds like when they abdicate their duty under the Constitution. We've been asking for months for basic oversight for the president and his advisors and their ties to Russia. But our chairman, Jason Chaffetz, has not lifted one finger. He has not requested a single solitary piece of paper. And think about where we are right now. General Flynn flew to Moscow to have a lavish dinner with President Putin and celebrate the Kremlin-backed media outlet RT. According to our own U.S. intelligence officials, RT is, and I quote, the Kremlin's principal international propaganda outlet, unquote. Flynn now admits that he got paid for that trip, but he refuses to say how much he was paid. He may have violated the Constitution in the process. As a retired officer, he may not, except for foreign emoluments. The Pentagon is investigating this, and we may hear back from them this week. Flynn was secretly communicating with Russian officials at the same time Russia was attacking our democracy. Let me say that again. Flynn was secretly communicating with Russian officials at the same time that Russia was attacking our democracy. Flynn may have violated the Logan Act by discussing the sanctions imposed by the United States in response to Russia's attacks. We have no idea why Flynn was doing all of this and why he was trying desperately to help Russia. And I know he's now resigned, but he's not going to get off that easy. We need some answers to a whole lot of questions. But the obvious questions are, what did the president know, and when did he know it? Was the president aware of Flynn's efforts? Did he support them? Last night, we learned that the Justice Department warned the White House counsel 3 weeks ago that Flynn secretly talked with the Russians about sanctions and may have lied about it to the vice president. The department warned that the national security advisor was at risk of being blackmailed by the Russian government. And that was 3 weeks ago. 3 long weeks ago, 21 days ago. So why did the president say on Friday he did not know anything about Flynn's calls with the Russian ambassador? Did the White House counsel really never tell the president? Because if that's true, if that is true, I cannot see how the White House counsel could stay in his position. That would be a major national security breach not to inform the president of such a serious charge. Another question, why did Flynn continue to sit in on the most sensitive classified meetings until just 2 days ago? Ladies and gentlemen, something is wrong with that picture. Who at the White House? And I want the press to press these questions. Who at the White House decided to do nothing for 3 weeks as Flynn sat in on meeting after meeting after meeting? Did the president decide to wait? Did counsel decide to wait? Something is wrong here. Madam Leader, just this morning, Flynn tweeted, and this is a quote, "Scapegoat," end of quote. Scapegoat. He basically described himself as a scapegoat. And so I believe we need to hold a public hearing with Flynn to get to the bottom of this. Our committee held 3 or 4 hearings, emergency hearings on Hillary Clinton in a matter of a week or two. And if there was any emergency at this moment in the history of this country, this is the moment. And so we need to get his security and clearance documents. I want to see them. I want to see what he put in those documents to find out if he was honest on those forms. And we need to know how much he got paid to have dinner with Putin. But that is only the beginning. The press has asked us over and over again. I know they've asked Mr. Schiff and asked the leader, does it end here? Shouldn't things end here? No, they cannot end here. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a fight for the soul of our democracy. The question is whether we will clearly understand that this is our watch. And let's be clear. Schiff said it quite eloquently. The Republicans need to join us. This is not a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. It's not an independent issue. This is an American issue for the soul of our democracy. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the chairman, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Conyers.
Unless we want to yield to the leader.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
Our ranking members.
Thank you so much. The overdue resignation of General Flynn last evening does not resolve this matter. I want to make that clear because I've been trying to get my chairman of the Judiciary Committee to hold a hearing immediately today, certainly not later than tomorrow. What did President Trump knew and when did he know it? What did Vladimir Putin know and when did he knew it? How is it possible that the White House counsel knew this for about 3 whole weeks and did nothing? Now, the American people deserve answers, and they're not receiving them from either the Trump administration or from the Republican Congress. So we will do everything within our power to continue to get to the bottom of this very serious breach in trust and security. We have not heard back from our leadership today, and we've called repeatedly to Chairman Goodlatte about this matter. Now, why is it that the Flynn resignation does not resolve this matter? We need to know and to find out who authorized Flynn to speak to the Russians. We need to know why he lied to the administration and the American people, and why the White House counsel's office sat on this information for 3 weeks. Now, it would surprise me to find out that Flynn was acting on his own. He seems to speak to the President of the United States almost every day. And so we want everyone to know that this is just the beginning of an inquiry, that we're not making accusations, we're just trying to find answers to these very vexing problems. Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Good afternoon. I'm Benny Thompson, Ranking Member of Homeland Security. From what you've heard from other members, this resignation only starts the issue. There are a lot of unanswered questions. You can't blame the press for a person's resignation. The press, just like the people, have a right to know. There are a lot of unanswered questions that go with this resignation that as members of Congress, we're duty bound to try to find answers to. So I'm looking forward to the leadership, should they desire, on the Republican side, to step forward and do the right thing for this country. Russia, under any circumstance, has demonstrated that they are a bad actor and complicit in a lot of what's going on. The people have a right to know. And so we're here today to put front and center that while this is the people's house, the people, just like members of Congress, have a right to know what's exactly behind the resignation, who knew what was going on before the phone calls, whether there are transcripts available. We understand there might be, but that's why Congress can get engaged in this as well as the people, so we can finally get some answers. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Elliot Engel. I'm the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you, Madam Leader, and thank you, fellow ranking members. Good afternoon. The National Security Council is at the top of our foreign policy decision-making apparatus. If the Council is dysfunctional, if its leadership is compromised, it puts our national security at risk. So it's a good thing that General Flynn stepped down. But his departure raises more questions than it answers. What promises did General Flynn make to Putin's ambassador, and who else was involved? How deep were the connections between Russia and President Trump's campaign prior to the election? Why did the White House ignore the warnings of the Justice Department and allow someone subject to Putin's blackmail to remain in a critical national security role? This problem, therefore, is far from resolved. We need to pursue, punish, and protect. Pursue the answers about Russia's interference in our election and Putin's ongoing ties to this administration, a thorough investigation by a nonpartisan commission. Punish those responsible for trying to undermine our democracy from overseas. And protect future elections from this sort of unlawful interference. Legislation introduced by Ranking Member Cummings, the Protect Our Democracy Act, and my own bill, the Secure Our Democracy Act, would put us on the right path. These bills should be no-brainers. But we don't hear much from our Republican friends. Unfortunately, House Republicans don't seem to have any interest in dealing with this challenge. It's really hard to believe. A foreign government tried to undermine our democracy and until last night had compromising material on a very senior administration official that we know of. Republicans don't seem to care. What else does Putin have? And on whom? Apparently, House Republicans aren't interested in finding out. Already today, their leadership has offered a collective shrug when asked if there should be an investigation. That's the definition of putting party before country. But we're not going to back down. We're going to press this issue again and again until we get answers. Democrats are not going to remain silent. House Foreign Affairs Democrats are not going to remain silent. This isn't about politics. This is about grappling with a real threat to our security and our democracy. Thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Neal, the ranking member of the committee.
Thanks. We're about to undertake the most comprehensive tax reform plan that Congress has witnessed since 1986, before the internet was invented. And during the course of the campaign, President Trump noted, and remember, a campaign is about forming a government, and he indicated during the course of that campaign that the American tax system was broken. There's universal agreement on that. He then took it to the next step when he said only he knew how to fix a broken tax system. So we're hopeful that he'll share that information with us as to where the fractures occur. So there's an opportunity to go forward. The last 7 American presidents have released to the American people their tax forms. And they've done it as a standard operating procedure through the course of the campaign and then subsequently during their time as president. It was an annual event. And there was sufficient opportunity then for members of Congress, members of the administration, and the media to sift and sort what those tax forms told us. So in this instance, I think there is, again, an opportunity for all of us to review the president's tax forms to find out just how extensive the overseas investments have been. And it'll then give the American people the chance to see it. He indicated that once the audit was done, that he would release the tax forms. And then pointed out just a few weeks ago through a spokesperson that the American people didn't care about those tax forms. Well, I believe ABC News has indicated that 75% of the American people would like to see the tax forms consistent with what the last 7 American presidents have done. Now it's a pleasure to introduce Leader Pelosi.
I thank my colleagues for their leadership and their presentation on this important issue, the national security of the United States. It's really their presentation. I'm here to answer questions. if you have any. But I will say this, I didn't know until I heard from our colleague that the tweet of General Flynn today was scapegoat. Scapegoat. You know what a scapegoat is? That means in a community where people want to absolve themselves of guilt, they get a goat and they heap all of the ills onto the goat, and then they run the goat out of town. So the inference to be drawn from his statement is that other people have blame that should be shared in all of this. The good news is that General Flynn is gone because he was totally inappropriate, wrong for the job. But the questions that arise are even bigger. I have a tweet I'm going to make. I'm telling my staff right now. It's not scapegoat. It's Stonewall. And that's exactly what the Republicans in Congress are doing. The Intelligence Committee has said they're not pursuing this. The Judiciary Committee said they're not pursuing this. We don't know what's happening in the Senate. I'm just talking about the House. And again, Mr. Neal, whose importance in this meeting is that we need to see the truth of the President Trump's investments. His committee has the authority, the chairman of the committee in the House or the chairman in the Senate, Chairman Brady or Chairman Hatch, and in addition to that, Finance Committee and Ways and Means Committee, the Joint Committee on Taxation, the chairman of that committee, Mr. Brady, again, have the authority to ask the the Secretary of the Treasury for the tax returns of anyone in our country if there's reason to know that. They can ask for the president's tax returns, and then by a vote of their committee, they can decide whether they should be released to the public. So there's another stonewalling because they said they can't be caught up in, rummaging. This isn't rummaging. This is truth and consequences. The truth is the American people have a right to know the truth. We see the consequences that can be dangerous to our national security. We want to know by what authority did General Flynn have these conversations, and who did he report to after that, among the other questions that our colleagues have posed. I'm sure they'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Oh, am I doing Nancy?
A couple of questions. So Mr. Cummings' chairman said today that it's not within your committee's purview. Then the chairman of your committee said that all these conversations between Mr. Flynn and the president are probably covered under executive privilege anyway, so there's nothing to know. So two questions. Why do you think that at least right now Republican leaders don't want to investigate, and what's the biggest unanswered question you have right now?
I don't know why they don't want to investigate. I don't know why, but let me tell you something. I agree with Ranking Member Schiff. It's fine for the Intelligence Committee in the House and in the Senate to look at this. One of my concerns has always been, having headed up the Select Committee, and Schiff was on that committee too, on Benghazi. We saw what happened there. It got into a partisan problem, big problems. And so my position was, it's fine for them to do that, the intelligence committees, but we need to have this commission sort of based on the 9/11 commission, so that they could figure out exactly what happened, have subpoena power, no senators, no congressmen on that commission, but reputable citizens, just like the 9/11 commission, to get recommendations, find out what happened, get recommendations, and make sure it doesn't happen again. I think that's the best way to handle this. But as far as why he won't do it, you have to ask him. But one of the things that I've said in my committee is that if you're going to operate with Hillary Clinton and do what they did to her, I mean, if they heard a rumor about Hillary Clinton, there was a major investigation. And all I'm saying is the things that we are looking at here, you're talking about Russians hacking our election system? I mean, I don't think you can get any bigger than that. But again, you have to ask them. He may have some, I think he talks to the Republicans more. Maybe he can tell you, give you a better answer.
Our investigation on the Intelligence Committee by bipartisan agreement is going to look at any contacts the Russians had with U.S. persons during the course of the presidential campaign. The question that's been raised within the last 48 hours is, will the scope of that investigation now include contacts after the campaign between people like Flynn and the Russian ambassador? I haven't had a chance to discuss that with the chairman. I think it ought to be a natural extension of what we do. If we're going to be looking at Flynn's contacts with the Russians during the campaign, we ought to be looking at the continuation of those contacts after the campaign. But in terms of the executive privilege, that privilege, number one, is not usually something that the Congress invokes. That's invoked by the executive. It's something that the Congress usually challenges. But beyond that, that privilege doesn't apply to the time before Flynn became National Security Advisor and before the President became sworn in. So it has complete inapplicability to this conversation with the Russian ambassador. Moreover, even after he became National Security Advisor, if we look at the Benghazi Select Committee, we did interview Susan Rice during the course of that investigation while she was National Security Advisor. So there may or may not be things that the administration asked to be walled off in terms of privilege, but that's not something we should be asserting for them, and it wouldn't at all cover any kind of the communications before he took office.
Yes, Leader Pelosi, in light of all this, in light of the last 3 weeks, you guys are out of power. You really can't do anything but complain. How has your strategy evolved for how to combat this administration and how ultimately to win back power?
Well, I don't associate myself with your characterization. All we do is complain. They have given plenty grist to the mill for undermining the democracy of our country, the national security of our country, and I commend my colleagues on their respective committees for their leadership in putting forth this. But I will make a distinction. When President Obama was sworn in on January 20th, on the steps of the Capitol, he called for swift, bold action now for jobs and education and all for the 21st century and more. 1 week and 1 day after that, the House passed the Recovery Act. 1 week later, the Senate passed it. And on February 17th, that would be Friday of this week, the administration and Congress worked together for a bill for legislation that created or saved around 4 million jobs. Where is their jobs bill? Where's their jobs bill? They're making a mess on the national security side, but where is what they talked about during the campaign? They were going to create jobs. Where is their jobs bill? Where is their infrastructure bill? We haven't had seen hide nor hair of any of that. Where is their, they were supposed to notify Congress to begin the process of renegotiating NAFTA. Not a word, not a whimper. And they'll never be able to complete that in the first 100 days because they haven't started the process. So the fact is, we're not here to complain. We're here to make a distinction. I've told President Trump that I worked very closely with President Bush on many things, even though I disagreed with him with the war in Iraq. What could be worse than that? As well as disagreed with his privatizing of Social Security. But we worked on many things, and I can go into them if you want. But the fact is that they have offered nothing. They have put forward nothing to work with them on, and we want to make that distinction. But I heard someone in the press yesterday say, well, what do you expect? They've only been in office 3 weeks. Well, 4 weeks from when President Obama was sworn in, we had a job creating to the tune of millions, job out there. He had already signed the Lilly Ledbetter Act, S-chip and other legislation as well. So this is not about complaining. This is about calling for action. And again, on this issue about our national security, which we take an oath of office, and if Hillary Clinton had won the election, we still need to know what the involvement of the Russians was in disrupting our election. So the question is, why is the FBI not fully investigating the political, personal, and financial ties of Donald Trump to the Russians? Show us your tax reform return so we can see what some of that connection might be, and stop flirting with lifting sanctions and condemning the START Treaty and the rest of that, which have because you're flirting with Russia, which has a direct impact on the safety of the American people. Any of my colleagues wish to respond to that? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
This question is for you, Leader Pelosi, and also ranking membership. You both are members of the Gang of Eight, so I was
Yes.
wondering if you all were briefed at all
Mr. Flynn.
We have not yet been briefed on that subject, and we do get periodic briefings if, for example, there are counterintelligence investigations involving U.S. persons. If that comes to the attention of the intelligence community, we do get periodic briefings. I would expect this falls very much in that category, so I would expect that we will get briefed on it. We are going to be requesting that we get any transcripts, any tape recordings of conversations between Flynn and the Russian ambassador. I hope those will be provided to us. Those are not only going to be a necessary part of investigation, but those are things that I think we ought to get as part of the Gang of Eight.
Before they destroy them. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you, do you think that this investigation into Flynn and the fallout from it could lead to Trump's impeachment down the road?
We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about accountability to the American people. We're talking about truth and consequences and concerned about lies and danger to the American people. Does anyone?
I agree.
Is that not that's not a possible consequence, though? I mean,
No, this isn't calling for investigation, for calling for an outside, nonpartisan, independent commission, as Eric Swalwell has done, and others have joined him, to call for, Mr. Cummings, of course, leading the way on that, to call for an outside independent commission to investigate the Russian connection. Impeachment's about another subject. It's about whether the president has broken the law. That's not what we're talking about here.
And the other thing that, one of my colleagues said it a little bit earlier, we have a duty under the Constitution. Every 2 years, we raise our hands and swear that we're going to uphold the Constitution. And part of our duty is check and balance. And so we're just trying to do our job. And again, I don't want you all to miss this. Don't miss this. This is a fight for the soul of our democracy. I mean, if you really think about it, it is a fight for it. That's what it's about.
I don't know if this was said before I came in, but this is the third administration person to resign. Carter Page. I don't even know what Manafort's first name is. Manafort and now Flynn. So if we were not looking into it, you would wonder. You have a heightened responsibility now because this is about transparency. Openness is a characteristic of a democracy. Secrecy is the tool of an authoritarian regime, and they are engaging in secrecy at the expense of our national security. One last question. Yes, sir.
I mean, aside from the specifics of this, what's your general reaction or response to the fact that this is a high-profile member of the administration resigning with a lot of questions less than a month into an administration? Just the timing of all of this.
Does anyone want to speak to I mean, I will in closing, but I want to yield to my colleagues.
Well, it's profoundly concerning, I think, at a couple levels. One, for what it says about the administration itself, its disorganization, and as I mentioned earlier, its tolerance for the fact that they had propagated this lie to the American people, and until it was exposed, they weren't willing to set the public straight. But it's also concerning because, we just had the North Koreans launch a missile into the sea. There may be a crisis with Iran tomorrow. We need a National Security Council and infrastructure that works, that's not dysfunctional, that's not at each other's throat, that's not worried about whether they're going to have a job tomorrow. And we don't have a functional National Security Council. We don't have a particularly functional White House when it comes to national security. And that's terribly concerning just in terms of the paramount responsibility of government, that is protecting the country.
Any of our colleagues? Mr. Thompson, did you? Well, let me just, please,
I just want to reiterate, we have had our election, our democracy, potentially compromised by things that Russia has done. I mean, that would be bad enough just in itself. But when you then add that there may very well be collusion between high-ranking officials in this administration with the Russians, I mean, that's just a double whammy. That's something that should scare all of us as Americans who really love our democracy and cherish it. This, to our knowledge, has never happened before. And, my Republican colleagues who I know many are wary of Russia and Putin and what he stands for. It's just unbelievable to me that they are not leading the charge to demand the bottom line, the truth from this administration in terms of Russia, in terms of hacking our election, in terms of trying to undermine the democratic process. I cannot remember in my lifetime another crisis, and that includes Watergate, that's more serious than this one is right now.
I think it's important to note, because most people don't know what the National Security Council is and how important it is. The person who is the chairman, who is the President's National Security Advisor, is the person who manages all of the, say, for example, all the committees that we're talking about, the Department of State, we're talking about the Department of Homeland Security, we're talking about the Department of Defense, we're talking about Foreign Affairs, all of the aspects of our national security. So clearly the President exercised very poor judgment in putting in somebody there who couldn't even manage himself. Thank God he is gone. But again, it raises so many questions about the judgment of the President. And I will take it one step further, and my colleagues don't have to associate themselves with this. But my fear is now we will have as a shadow National Security Advisor Bannon, and his national security vision influencing all of the agencies of government that I mentioned, as well as advising the President. So this is deadly, deadly serious, what's happening now. And there's a chance to right the course, there's a great deal of respect for the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security. So there's some people there who may be able to right the ship. But right now, this is a raging example of a president who is incompetent, reckless, and strategically incoherent. Thank you all.
Brilliantly handled. Glad you did it.
Oh, we've been joined